Take it away, Martin.
Thanks, Jeff. Hey, everyone. So, I mean, obviously, there's there's no one path to do this. There's definitely a few paths to doing this, and then a few methods of how to do it as well. So, but I'm not really accounting for too many individual differences. I can certainly answer questions throughout the presentation and also at the end. And also we may have a couple of players from the high performance squad jump on as well to answer some questions, which would be kind of useful for you guys. But what I've tried to do is try to give you some of the basic things that are going to be important to you about where to base yourself and how to finance it and things like this. So that's. It's an interesting one. So, and it's something that is, this is a big part of my role as high performance director, and I feel as though it's probably the area that I haven't really given too much attention to. Maybe not because I don't think it's important. I think it's one of the most important things. I think anyone that's on this call listening to this is probably the incredibly important stakeholder in the success of squash in Canada, and we need to get this right. And so that's really, so part of this is for me to try to give you some information, but also to try to ask some questions and find out what we can do for you to make this process easier. So by mapping it out, it helps give you some information, it helps identify the questions, and then helps us be able to deliver something that is meaningful for you. So yeah, let's go. So next slide, please, Jeff. So just a little bit of a précis of what we're looking at today in terms of content. Like why turn pro? I would give it some good read. Like what's the reason? Like what's going to be the cost in terms of lifestyle, in terms of financial costs? What the benefits are. Pretty simple questions, but still quite good to ask them. Some of the timelines when you're looking to turn pro, when you should start thinking about it, like at what point it makes sense to to maybe not play anymore, so that it doesn't affect your future career, or to keep on going to fulfill your goals. Goal setting, which is incredibly important to understand what you're trying to get out of this. Rather than just, okay, I don't have anything else to do, let's do this. It's important to have goals. It's very competitive. It's definitely important to have an idea of what you're trying to achieve, and it's different for everyone. The skills in being a pro is really not just about being a good squash player. There's lots of other skills you need to have to be a good professional player, not least being able to travel well and have some great habits and deal with adversity and loneliness and all these kind of things. It's all part of the package. The apprenticeship, we'll just go into how to get started and what to expect. It's unlikely you're going to be like a Sherbini or a Rami Ashur and just come out of nowhere and just beat everyone. Normally people have to go through some kind of apprenticeship. So we'll talk about that a little bit. Scheduling, very important to understand what your month, what your day, what your week, what your month, what your year looks like. And we'll take a look at that. Where to base yourself is it's an important question. There's going to be different answers to this. I think if we do manage to get any of the high performance players jumping on, they'll be able to give you a bit more information. But I'll try and give you some idea of how to approach this. The financing, obviously huge. So we'll talk a bit about how that's possible and what the costs are likely going to be. There is a range, obviously, in how you decide to approach this, but we're going to look at optimal budget and then kind of the likely scenario. And some of the harsh realities of being a pro player as well. We'll talk about that and what to expect. And then really what we can offer, try to, as I mentioned before, trying to get some feedback and then find out what we can do. So next slide, Jeff. Okay, so why turn pro? I mean, it seems a simple question, but I think it's worth spending a couple of minutes on this. Obviously, it's a natural extension of your, a very good junior career or a very good college career. It gives you a defined goal as well. There's a ranking list, and there's ranking lists in your country, and there's ranking lists in PSA, amongst other ranking lists as well. So you can have a defined goal, and it's most other jobs that you have, it's mostly appraisals and things like this that are going to define your success. Whereas here you can set your goals, and then you can measure your success off your wins and your ranking, and whether you manage to eventually represent your country and things like this. So it's easier to goal set, and it's easier to feel like you've reached a certain goal. And also, you'll never have another opportunity. Once you decide to leave it and go and work for a few years and pursue another career, you can't go back. I mean, it's too difficult. It's too difficult to change your focus and go in to be a professional athlete when you're 25 years of age. You really have one opportunity at doing it. I do know of people that have maybe taken a year out and maybe worked. But it's still difficult. I've never seen that with people that have achieved high level, let's say. So I think it's one of these things that you kind of, if you don't at least think about it and consider it, it's really not going to happen after that. It's not like another career. It's a physical career. It's like it requires a lot of focus. This is your opportunity if you're going to take it. It gives you international travel. Obviously, that's a huge thing for some people. That was certainly a big thing for me, having the ability to travel around the world, widen my perspective. You increase the circle of friends and contacts that you have. You do become a member of an international community, and that's probably irrespective of your level as well. The fact that you've done it and the fact that you are traveling, I think that's something that all the players have. You're part of this international community now. I mean, I certainly feel that pretty much wherever I go, if you kind of just parachuted me into any country in the world, I could probably find a squash club. I could probably find people that knew who I was and managed to kind of get into the community that way. I mean, that's just a wonderful thing to have. And so I also think it builds your resume. We'll talk a little bit more about this as well, but in terms of having, being a professional athlete, it's not an easy thing to do. There's a lot of different skills that you need, but so I think up to a point, it builds your resume. So for that next step in your life as well. And that's probably one of the main things I want to get across from this presentation is, why you do it. And if you're not going to be top 10 in the world or top 8 in the world, which is obviously a very hard thing to do, then what's the optimal amount of time to do this without actually affecting your future career if it's not going to be in squash or in coaching. But up to that point, it absolutely builds your resume and increases your market value for future employers. I mean, it's kind of cool. I mean, I'm sure if you talk to Graham Riding now, I mean, it's probably one of the reasons that he managed to get a great job in finance and managed to end his career trajectory. And I'm sure he also had some great skills that he learned from being a pro athlete that helped him in his career as well. So there are some benefits to this as well in your future life. And you can also study. I mean, if it's there's other things you'll learn on the tour. You'll learn a lot of different things, meet a lot of friends, make a lot of contacts. You learn about a lot of different things. But you can also study at the same time. If you're worried about that, I mean, I think that Danielle Letourneau was doing her CFA. I know that a lot of players on the tour they try to use the time to kind of get accredited in some way without taking complete focus away from what they're doing. Cam Seth is obviously studying as well. He's doing his masters right now. You want to, it's something worth considering anyway. If you feel as though it's a good thing to do as you're studying. If you're going to do like accreditation after a degree, then it's something you can do together with being a pro athlete. Next slide. Okay, timelines. If any of you were on the college webinar a few weeks back, we talked about this. This is really the first, as you start your sophomore year, your second year in high school, that's really when you should be looking at the different types of colleges and where you want to go. And it's certainly the same with PSA. It's like as you're considering that next step in a couple of years' time, that's about the right time to think about, around about age 15, 16. Could be earlier for some, but that's roughly the age that you want to be thinking about the possibilities, and having a look at what this is going to look like. How are you going to fundraise? How are you going to finance it? Where are you going to base yourself? What's it going to look like? If you do decide to attend college, that first year, I think it's advisable to focus on your studies and focus on playing. Again, I'm making an assumption. I'm not really going to talk about how the coronavirus is going to affect this situation. I'm making an assumption that this is going to be, everything's going to be fine and everything's going to restart again. But you're really looking for that first year after college. That's when you should be thinking about playing some PSA events, some close satellites, and trying to build your experience and also your points, so that eventually when you do leave college and this is what you want to do, you have a springboard. You don't have to start right from the bottom. CSA will restrict you to 4 PSA tournaments in a college year. I think you can play more in the summer, but that's something that it hasn't come, it's not a rule yet, but that will come in at some point. Something also worth knowing is that you're going to make a loss. The first 2 years, I would say that's an apprenticeship that you are going to make a loss in that time, and we'll talk about the finance. But you know, it's, as I said, it's unlikely you're going to be a Rami Ashur or a Sherbini and come along and you know, just beat everyone and, you know, make a few $100,000 a year. You know, it's just not going to happen. So, or it's highly unlikely to happen. Those are outliers. So the likelihood is that you make a loss. You've got to be okay about that investment, the investment time, energy, focus, and money for those 2 years. We'll talk a little bit about how college affects that. It's each phase tends to be about 2 years. There's lots of different levels in PSA. Each phase tends to be about 2 years. You can do the first phase in college where you get some points, you get some experience. So that's worth having them in the back of your mind as well, about whether you're making the decision to go to college or not. And as I mentioned before, if you play for about 4 or 5 years, it's not going to affect your future prospects. And I think that is something that is that's certainly a conflict that arises. So people that are studying at great colleges in Canada and the US right now, they're probably going to have pretty good employment options straight out the bat. What's their incentive to go play PSA? A lot of them feel as though there's not much incentive. I personally feel as though it's a great experience. I think if a lot of employers feel this as well, it's a great experience to be able to focus on this and for a certain amount of time. And, it's really, you will peak about 27, 28. That's when most, if you look at all the World Championship finalists over the last 20, 30 years, pretty much most of them will be 27, 28. Like, averages out about 27, 28. Some younger, some older, but averages out at that time. Around about 27 is when you're going to peak. 27, 28 is when you're going to peak. I think most people achieve their highest rankings at that time. Again, some before, some after, but that is on average. So if you're looking at peak as round about that, once you go beyond that, that's your career at that point. And that is probably when you do start losing a little bit of your market value in other ways. So you're making a value judgment at that point, whether you can go beyond that. But it's worth having in the back of your mind. As you're thinking about this, as you're thinking about college, you're probably all educated and smart, and you can go to college and you can have another career. So what's your incentive? I don't think it's going to make that much of a difference for a few years after college. If you want to keep it going until 27, I think that's okay. I think that as long as you're studying in that time, I think it's okay. If you happen to be top 10 in the world at that point, then you can make a great career at that point as well. And then you have to navigate it in a different way. But if you're thinking of like a future career, then I think you can get away with it up to round about 25, 26, something like that, and it's not going to affect your future career. Again, looking at Graham Writing, it's very successful now in Bay Street in finance, and I think he was probably 30 by the time he retired. But he also studied at the same time. He used the last four credits that he had through his athlete funding, which we will talk about as well. He used the credits to study for free. And so he used those last 4 years of his career to get a degree, so that when he did retire, he was ready to move into another marketplace. Okay, next slide. Okay, so it's important to goal set. Anything you do, it's important to understand your goal. The fact that you have some defined goals in PSA and playing pro, it's a little bit easier. But I think you should also be honest about yourself as well, about what you want to try and achieve. Everyone wants to go world #1. Everyone wants to be top 10 in the world. Everyone wants to play for the national team. But give yourself a realistic goal. What do you want to get out of it? I would say that, and there's a few different things that go into that. It's, time, money, effort, focus. So like the fact that there is an opportunity cost to anything. Whenever you focus a lot on one thing, there's an opportunity cost. You don't do something else. So you need to be okay with that opportunity cost, whatever that is. And it takes time and effort. And it's, but once you set your goal, it's going to be easier to plan your path at that point. If you just want the lifestyle of being a pro athlete, I think that's a good goal to have, to be honest with you. I think that's fine, but that's not going to be the goal that drives you to success. That's going to be a kind of subsidiary thing that happens. That's going to be a kind of ancillary benefit of being a pro athlete. If you set out with that as your goal, it's unlikely you're going to be successful. You need to have goals that you want to achieve within the sport rather than just being a pro athlete. So, but I think goal setting is an important thing to do, and to be honest with yourself and set yourself a ranking, set yourself some achievable goals. And, you know, usually goals that are short term, medium term, long term, you can have, but try to and talk to your coach and you know, if you are in a national program, obviously I'll be able to help you with that as well, to be able to set your goals and figure out a plan of how to achieve them. It's a very important thing to do. Next slide. So, as I said, there's lots of different skills in being a pro. These are, you know, this is kind of general information again, as I said, but it's just highlights some of the things that you need so that you're aware that it might seem elementary, but you're aware that there's other skills that you need. There's lots of different skills going into be a pro athlete. I've known great players that just don't travel well, and some of the at junior level, some players that they were beating and they were better than, they couldn't handle the travel, and then their friend went on and became world number one. I mean, that's actually happened, and so I've seen that a few times where people, it's just not, the lifestyle is tough, or they just don't have the ability to be able to build a skill set in other areas. So it's not just about being a good squash player, it's about having a skill set and an attitude, and it's not just about being a player, obviously. So obviously you need to be able to have the high performance habits, which I talked about in a coaching webinar just maybe I think last week. Certainly I think Jeff can share that with you as well. But it's just about having great habits in terms of how you warm up, how you focus, how you warm down, your nutrition, your sleep, your, like, everything, how you rest, like the planning, the goal setting. All of these things are skill sets that you need to have. If you're just trying to play all the time, trying to train all the time, and you don't have the habits of a high performance athlete, it's not going to work. You're going to break down, you're going to get injured. You know, having people helping you, coaches and trainers, is incredibly important as well. I'm not going to go into all the aspects of that right now. I'm trying to give you an overview rather than go into every single detail about it. But it's important to have these high performance habits. It's important to, like, the way that you get better is you always want to look at your bottlenecks and figure out like what they are and how to get better. You're only as good up to a point. You're only as good as your biggest weakness, and after a certain amount of time, you're not going to be successful unless you have some competitive advantage. So the way I put that is learn how to raise your floor and your ceiling, and that's it. And it's a constant battle. That's what you're doing. You're always trying to get better. You're always trying to get better at the basics. You're always trying to fix the bottlenecks in your game, the slight weaknesses that people take advantage of. But at the same time, you're also trying to build the skills that make you better than someone else. How do you play? How do you manage to dominate games? It's not about just copying someone else. It's about what are your skills. How can you get better at? How can you impose those on the game? And it's a constant growth mindset as well. You're always working. You're always looking to get better. Traveling well is huge. Dealing with jet lag. You know, how you're eating when you're hours and hours of jet lag different. You know, being able to operate. A lot of athletes tend to be perfectionists. You want to get everything right when you travel. Like, it's a lot of things happen where things are not going to be perfect. You're not going to have a great warm up area. You can't get the right kind of food at the right time in the right situation, and it's you got to be able to prepare for everything. And so that, expecting that things are not going to be perfect. And most of the time it's going to be okay, but you've got to still have a mindset that, I'm still gonna perform even if things are not perfect. And that also defines, if you're too brittle and the court's a little bit slippy, you don't get good refereeing decisions, you didn't get the best meal, you feel jet lagged. All of these things, the ability to handle these things makes you a good pro. And it's I can't emphasize that enough. Managing your schedule, we'll talk about that in a second. Just being able to manage yourself and choose tournaments. Again, coaches are very useful for this, and but that's also important. It's going to be difficult to start off with, as it's difficult to get into tournaments. But again, we'll look at ways around this, and we can ask questions at the end. PSA closed satellites are probably a good way to kind of start this off. You're not going to have a choice to be able to choose your schedule the first couple of years. It should get easier beyond that. Yeah, learning how to handle adversity. I just, I mentioned that before. It's one of the biggest things about being an athlete is not being brittle. Learning how to manage your costs, seeking sponsorship, other forms of financing. It's when you're a professional athlete, you can't just outsource. At least when you begin, you can't just outsource all of this stuff to other people. We're not. It's not like you're, playing NCAA football and, you're going to get picked up by a team and they take care of everything. You have a manager and an agent and they take care of everything. But it's like you pretty much have to do this by yourself, and with some resources, but knowing how to look for those resources is going to be important. Knowing how to look for sponsorship in your club, in your town, in your provincial organization, your national organization. That there's ways of helping you finance this, and having some kind of plan is going to help you. Learning how to win. Winning is a skill. Being a great competitor and winning it's definitely, it's not just a result of all the other things. It's actually a skill within itself. And looking at it like that, rather than, I'm doing everything right, why am I not winning? Is because you're obviously not good enough at winning. I mean, it's the number of times you're going to have this perfect game is probably 1 in 50 times you walk on court where you're just playing amazingly well and everything works out. Most of the time you're going to carry little injuries and you're not going to get the right decisions. Things are not going to be perfect. But learning how to win under those circumstances is a massive skill. And again, one of the biggest ones. Learn how to handle adversity, learn how to win when you're not playing great. It's not just about being a great player, it's about being a great traveler, being a winner, knowing how to build that skill. And it does take time, and some people are just better at it than others. They learn it very young, they're just natural winners. And other people need to learn it, but it's definitely a learnable skill. You also need to learn how to lose. I mean, every tournament you play, there's only going to be one winner, and so most of the time, the vast majority of the time, you're going to walk away as a loser. So you need to learn how to lose, but then don't be happy about it. Use it as motivation to understand where you fell short, and then try to kind of figure out a plan of how you're going to get better. Like how are you going to add to your armory after that, and what you're going to do to get there. So being aware that that is the case. Don't get down when you lose. Like, use it as a learning opportunity. That growth mindset is huge. And also learning how to present yourself and represent those that support you. That's part of it. The marketing, the branding, learning how to deal with people. It's also part of being a professional athlete, and that's how you're going to get. That's how people are going to want to help you, and kind of build your circle, and if you do end up getting pretty good, it's definitely how sponsors are going to look at you as well. So learning how to present yourself and represent others well is important, especially when you represent your country. That's huge. Next slide. So as I mentioned, the first 2 years, you're going to make a loss financially, but you're going to gain lots of knowledge. And that's really how you should think about this. You're not going to get immediate results. It's highly, highly unlikely that's going to be the case. So have the first couple of years as your learning time. Like, pick up a lot of information. Observe different different styles of play. Pick up the good habits. You've got to choose the people that you hang out with well. There's definitely going to be people on the tour that that are kind of there for the fun, or they just don't have a winning mentality, and they're just there to enjoy it, which is, again, it's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's if you understand how winners operate, and then you kind of observe them, and then you surround yourself with people that are kind of a little bit more in that mindset, then that's going to help you. If you're surrounding yourself with people that just want to party and have fun all the time, then that's probably what you're going to fall into. So you need to be able to understand, like, what are the good habits, and try to copy them if you can. I mean, that's really what you're trying to do. You're trying to pick up all this information, and what you'll find is you'll be able to pick up different techniques, different styles, different attitudes, different ways of being from different people, and eventually you're going to form like the player and the person that you are. But observe. That's an important thing. You're going to be halfway around the world a lot of the time. You're not going to have parents, teammates, fans, and it's a lot of the time it's going to be you're playing a local player, and the crowd's going to be behind them, and you have to get used to that. You have to get used to the fact that this is it can be quite lonely sometimes, and but it's okay, as long as your goals are there. Again, I think that's why the goal setting is important, is that you don't let these kind of situations get the better of you. You're able to set, have a goal in mind, you've worked hard at it, and this is you're there to do a job. So, and also, improvement is not linear. It's a lot of the time you're gonna plateau. You might even dip sometimes. And what you need to be aware of is that there's no analysis, practice, or effort that is wasted. Like, everything will pay off eventually. And even if that's in a lesson learned, even if you train too hard, you get overtired, you injure yourself. Okay, that's information that you're picking up that you can now change. So there's nothing that is going to be wasted in this. If you're focused on this, there's no amount of analysis or practice of it or effort that's going to be wasted. You can just get better at it. That's all. And just become more efficient in how to deal with the process of what you're trying to achieve. But don't expect improvement to be linear or exponential. Expect it to kind of be up and down, but the general trend will be upwards. It's lots of fun. The initial apprenticeship is tough, but it's lots of fun. I think that's worth mentioning as well. It's one of the reasons people want to do this in the first place, is that you have a goal, you can achieve a goal. It kind of helps you in your future career, if in some ways. It can help you with some skills as well in terms of handling adversity and focusing on a certain thing. But it's also a lot of fun, and it's a great. It's a privilege being a professional athlete, being paid to play and to basically you're being paid to try to become as good as you can, try to become an expert in something. That's a privileged position to be in. Jump on court with everybody. I mean, and again, it goes back to, observing different kinds of people. Is just, the first couple of years in your apprenticeship, just say yes, just say yes to everything, and try to pick up as much information as you possibly can. And that includes tournaments and leagues, assuming that you are getting enough rest and you're not going to injure yourself, and which is obviously obviously it will happen as part of being a professional athlete, to injure yourself. Initially, I think it's okay to overload a little bit as you set out, but I think it's, you're better erring on the side of more rather than less initially, just to pick up information and to then form the player that you're going to be. Next slide. So here's an idea of an annual schedule. I mean, obviously this is this looks very specific, and in some ways it is. It kind of mirrors a little bit of what the current PSA players are doing, which is quiet in June, obviously it's quiet in July as well. It's August, July, August. Sometimes you have things like Pan American Games, Commonwealth Games, so Pan American Championships. There will be, or for your World Junior Championships, there will be some tournaments in there, not for everyone, and it's not every single year, but I put it in here as an idea so that you're. But the idea behind the schedule is that you have defined periods that I think are useful for improvement and how to prepare for events, and also how to rest. Resting is one of the most important things as well. So you can go over that. I'm not going to go over incredibly detail right now. You can go over this as well, but just to list everything. Those quiet moments, where probably where you are right now, familiar environment with your family, with your coach, with your club, with people that care about you and care about how you're going to do. But and you have access to facilities, and it's and also it's that if you're in a group, you're also you're kind of having to stick to a schedule, someone else's schedule, and which is useful. That's the next phase, but it's definitely useful to have this quiet moment where you can go and you can. You watch videos, you talk to your coach, like you just go on and get on and solo, work on your technique, and it's good to kind of decompress sometimes to have this time. And it's not, your goal and your internal goal is still to be as good as you possibly can be in whatever your other extrinsic goals are. But you definitely need this little quiet period to be able to kind of reassess, let everything settle, figure out. I would say that's probably the thing that was my competitive advantage. Training in groups and then going back and training in this kind of quiet way allowed me to adjust and to work on technique and get fitter, stronger than I probably could do if I was working in a group all the time. So again, I think it's it's got its place, put it that way. Group training in terms of routines, condition games, You know, feeling part of a community, kind of helping each other on in some ways as well. There is some level of quality control there as well. And I would say that if, you know, how Squash Canada is going to move forwards, is that, you know, if are we going to have a national training centre? If we do, then that group training would be, if we can get everyone in Toronto, with, you know, with development players and also pros, and you know, and have some ability to do testing and video analysis, and you can work with other people and work with trainers. If that would be possible, that would be awesome to have those periods. As you can see from the schedule, it's not all the time. A lot of the time you're going to be traveling, playing tournaments, but at certain defined periods of the year, that is actually very important. Matches. So what I put in terms of matches is match practice and competitive behaviour before then going off and playing tournaments. Now, that can be, you know, home. It can be, you know, let's say a national training centre, or within a group, a high performance group, or it can also be when you're travelling and you're just looking for some match practice before you play the next tournament. There's some, you know, some delay in between. But that focus on competitiveness and matches is important. And so it's not the quiet period. It's not like the group training. It's where you're really focused and you're doing video analysis. You're trying to become better. You're playing matches. You're trying to become a better player. And it's a skill, as we said. Winning is a skill. So learning how to do that, learning how to compete in a kind of non-PSA setting is important. They can also be leagues. They can be tournaments, like smaller tournaments, like lead-up tournaments, warm-up tournaments. But it's important to have that structure there as well. And you can see from the schedule, it kind of leads from there, kind of rest, quiet periods, group training, matches, then tournaments. That's really how that structure goes. The rest is obviously very important. I think when I first made the schedule, I put in way more rest, and I think within here, you could probably have, you know, days, like a few days here and there, which is going to be rest. The rest that I'm talking about is actually kind of where you're kind of like, you know, decompressing away from, you know, when you've had you know, it's difficult to, you know, keep your focus all the time, and you do need to be able to schedule some rest in there, where you kind of get away from hitting the ball. You get away from, you know, you want to keep yourself fit and recover and rehab if necessary. But you really want to make sure that you kind of have that decompression time as well. So the rest is like, that's what these times are, but that's not including the natural rest that you're going to have, like weekly, and, you know, even in between tournaments, and just your regular rest days. That's to making an assumption that's not what these rest periods are. And also the tournaments. When you start off, you're probably going to try to play as many tournaments as you can. It's going to be unlikely you're just going to go and play leagues in Europe, because no one knows who you are, and it's going to be tough to get in. Eventually that will happen if that's what you want to happen. But you're looking at tournaments in terms of PSA. I would say 14, even up to 16 events as you start off with is fine. That's if you can get into those tournaments. You're going to enter a lot of tournaments, but when you do your first couple of years, you're looking to play more rather than less, because likelihood is you're not going to reach the final of all of these events. So you do need to be able to play quite a lot of events to get the number of matches to play. So this is assuming something like, what did I say here? It's like 18 weeks of competing, or 22 weeks of tour travel, and that includes PSA, includes national championships, includes Pan Ams, includes you know, all of the different things that you're going to be doing. So roughly the way that this works out is that you've got you know, 20 weeks of training, 10 weeks of rest, roughly 18 weeks of competing. And the way I've structured it here, which is what we're going to go into this in the next slide, is that where are you going to base yourself? What makes sense for you to have quiet periods, group training, match practice, and then actual tournaments? Where are you going to base yourself to make this happen? And hopefully, I think hopefully someone's going to, one of the high performance players is going to help answer these questions as well. There's different ways of doing it. There might be an optimal way of doing it, but I'm going to give you some idea just so you can answer these questions for yourself. But the way I've said is like, okay, you can go home. You know, I'm assuming that you can go home, you know, where you've got like roughly 14 weeks at home, where you're doing kind of rest and quiet periods. You know, holiday, you're traveling a lot. You don't necessarily want to be in holiday too much, but I put a couple of weeks in there. Where you just need to kind of decompress and get away. Toronto, 10 weeks. That's with the assumption that there's going to be some level of national training centre or group there. There are quite a few players there already, and but it's going to be more important at some time. It's probably over, just at the start of the year, in the middle of the year, when you're doing your kind of summer training. But that's making and also like every now and again just coming through for testing and to be part of the group and feel part of the community. But that's making the assumption that that's going to be there, which is something that we are working on right now. Tour travel 22 weeks, and then other 4 weeks, which is just your rest, rehab, promotional stuff, like other stuff that you do some camps just to make some money. That tends to happen, but that gives you a good outline of what your annual schedule kind of does look like for pros right now, and would likely look like for you. So hopefully that's useful. Next slide, Jeff. So this just basically goes over what I just said, and so there's no point in going into this too much. If there's any information in there I haven't mentioned, I think this is something we can talk about in questions. Is that what's your optimal schedule? Like, where do you base yourself? But I think it might be better with questions rather than me telling you, because there's different ways to achieve this. So I think you can go and read that later. But that's basically going on to basically recapping what I just said. The important part is that you've got rest, there's quiet training, the group training, the matches, and the tournaments that define periods of the year. It's important that that's the understanding. Next slide. Okay, so where do you base yourself? So the structure that I've just put in there, that kind of, it lends itself to the idea that you have a family home and you have a club that you're at this level right now. You can go back there and you can spend those kind of rest periods and also your kind of quiet periods where you kind of get away from the group, away from the tournaments, working on with yourself. But also the part-time base in Toronto, where you have something, it's going to be 8 to 10 weeks, something like that there, where you're training with a group, doing some testing, bit of analysis. You're working with the national team and the coaches and that whatever that group is going to look like. And I put a part-time base in Europe. So for 2 reasons. The first reason is that you just kind of want to get out there. First 2 years, you want to get out there. You want to experience as much as possible. There are bases in places like Sheffield with Nick Matthew, Bristol, Hadrian Stiff has got a place down there, and there's a lot of good players come through there. I mean, some of the top class players, same with Sheffield. Prague, Gregory Gauthier is out there. So I know that Nick Stackey has been out there as well. And so and there are other good bases around that. I mean, obviously in the US squash, we're going to have a huge base in Philadelphia. I don't know how that's going to impact any of our plans, but that's going to be quite an attractive complex, I would think, for a lot of players to be at. So there are places that you can go. So I think initially you want to pick up information. You want to be in that environment, pick up by osmosis as much as you can, observe all the things that we talked about before. But it also gives you a platform to then get into leagues. People will know who you are. You will get invited to play in leagues. At some point, there's pretty much every country in Europe has leagues, and that's kind of the bread and butter of how a lot of the European players have progressed, is by playing British League, English League, Scottish League, French League, Bundesliga in Germany, there's the Czech League, there's Belgian League, there's Dutch League. I mean, there's lots of different leagues around that you can use to make a living, but it's also just a kind of, it's part of this environment. It's how when you come back from a tournament and you're on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, you've got a league match. It's not, you're not feeling great and you're carrying a little bit of a niggly injury, but you've got to do it. And it's part of this process that you got to find a way to win. So when you're not feeling great. So I would say there's a few good reasons to do this at some point. You don't want to do this all the time. You don't want to do this for the whole of your career. But as you're learning, this is going to be useful. And I think what you find, if we do manage to get a couple of the high performance players on here, there are creative solutions around this as well. And also when you're traveling, there's creative solutions. Is that, if you're out in India and you play a tournament in Pakistan, tournament in India, in 2 weeks' time, there's a tournament in Hong Kong, you're not going to go back home. You're going to find a creative solution around that. You're going to go and train in Egypt with a couple of players, and then you're going to fly back out. I think you'll find a lot of the players do that. And really what I'm trying to say is that if you're paying a lot of money for rent. Let's say you're paying rent in Toronto for 52 weeks a year, or rent in Bristol for 52 weeks a year. It doesn't really make that much sense, I don't think, especially with the Airbnb. You know, if some of the players do have rooms within apartments where they're not paying too much, I mean, that does make sense in some ways if it's cheap enough. At least you have another place to come back to as well as home. But you are going to be spending a bit of time in different areas and in Europe and traveling, and it just doesn't really seem to be like are you going to pay $2,000 a month for rent when you're hardly ever there? Just doesn't seem to make much sense to me. I think there's other ways of going about this. Airbnb and Uber make life easy, obviously, when you're traveling. And if you're looking to come into Toronto, which is part of what I put in the schedule, we don't have anything where we can at the moment where we have dorm rooms or something like that where we can put you up, but that's something we can talk about, and certainly if one of the things that Squash Canada might be able to provide as we move forward. Next slide. Okay, so now that I didn't give you an exact answer on where to base yourself, I'll give you an inexact answer for financing, but just to give you some more information on what to expect when you do this. So when you are a member of the high performance squad, and there is a criteria that's not listed on the website, which is why there's no link here right now, but there are certain criteria that you fulfill to become part of the high performance squad. Lots of different criteria, reaching 3 quarterfinals of $10,000 events, for example, that would be one of them. But there's, you tend to find that there's players in there that are maybe top 125 in the world, like top 80, top 125 in men's PSA, top 80 in women's PSA, and so that's roughly the level. They've received $4,200 a year from Squash Canada, and that's the ones without carding, which was the athlete assistance program from Sport Canada. That's once, and also your provincial and territorial organisation, they'll be able to find funding for you as well, either as development athletes or as when you're fully carded athletes, you can get quite a lot. So the athlete assistance program by Sport Canada, at the moment they're given $85,000 to Squash Canada to then have a criteria to distribute to usually 4 players, but sometimes it's split between like 4 or 5 players. And that's you're going to get a little bit of money. That's tax free. So let's say you are one of the top players, you'd be receiving something like $21,600 or something like that. That's tax free. And then when you're a carded athlete, you can go to your provincial organisation, and then you can get about another 8, I believe. It differs from province to territory, but I think it's something like that. And again, the high performance players might have more information on this, but you're looking at roughly round about $30,000 tax free to be able to operate your professional career. So that's obviously very helpful, and that's before any income, any revenue that comes in. So, and usually, and I've given you I've listed the carding criteria. We're going to adjust that a little bit, but you can have a look at that. Usually, it means that you need to be within the top 100 or top 2 in the Canadian team. That finishes in the top 8 in the world teams. Those are the kind of main criteria that once you achieve that, then you're going to be eligible. It doesn't always mean you're going to get it because you're competing with other players, but it allows you to certainly be considered. And then once you get it, you've got to keep on progressing 10 spots per, or within that next tier, usually 10 PSA ranking spots per year to keep on getting it. It's progressive. And so otherwise it's going to go to someone else. There are development cards within there where you get a little bit less money, maybe half or slightly less, to be able to help you. At the moment, we don't have any funding for development players. So the people that are listening to this, whether it's coaches, parents, players, there is no development fund for development players that are looking to go pro. Which is something we can talk about and hopefully we can try to figure out ways of making this easier. How much does it cost to be a pro athlete? What you're looking at the first couple of years? So I've had different feedback from the high performance players, and from my own assessment, I initially thought it was going to be about $40,000 per year. If you're going to do this properly, and I'm assuming that you're not living in a penthouse in Park Avenue in New York, I'm assuming that you're just finding ways of fulfilling what that schedule looks like, where you're traveling, you've got some home time, you've got some training time in Toronto, but also some training time in other areas in Europe. I would assess that roughly around about 30, most likely $40,000 per year if you're going to do it properly. If you're not going to skimp, if you're going to go to a couple of different training bases, you're paying accommodation, you're paying all your travel, you're paying your food, you're paying your physio, your chiropractor, your trainer, your coach sometimes. It's going to be roughly around about $40,000 per year. You can do this, if you budget yourself and you choose your tournaments wisely, you drive to a lot of events, you don't go and base yourself in Europe, you don't have that experience of traveling to different places and picking up a lot of information. You bundle your tournaments together, so you go to New Zealand and you play 4 tournaments in a row, you do that a few times, then you probably can do it on something like 10 to 15,000 again if you live at home. But what you're really looking at is probably somewhere in between. You're looking at somewhere in the kind of $25,000 region if you're kind of smart about how you structure it, but you don't really want to skimp. There's certain things that you need to be able to. You need to travel. You need to eat. You need to have treatment every now and again, and the preventative stuff like having a trainer definitely helps. So that's kind of gives you a range with kind of, you take the midpoint in that range of roughly 25,000. I think that's a good idea of what you need to be raising or what you need to be thinking about spending in the first couple of years. As we mentioned before, college can sometimes get you over that initial hump. So that's kind of probably worth even factoring into whether you go to college or not, is that if it's going to cost you 25 grand a year for 2 years, let's say, as you get better and as you build your kind of understanding of the game and becoming a pro, you can do that with the last couple of years of your college career. So that of the cost offset in some way as you get an education. So interesting to think about anyway. Yeah, and we can talk. I would certainly want to think about how we're going to manage to help anyone that's interested in doing this. But there's another way you can do it, is that you can fundraise yourself. And there's always people that want to help you. Is it going to be difficult to raise 25 grand? Of course it is. Is it going to be can you raise $5,000 from your local community because they want to support you? Certainly would say that's very possible. There's certainly ways of doing this. But that's something that you need to be thinking about. It's not just a matter for your national federation to help every single person that wants to go pro achieve their goals. That's just not going to happen. It's certainly not at the kind of $40,000 level. So you need to be able to help yourself in some ways as well. So getting some fundraisers going, like getting your local community to support you in some way, and then being able to service that community, making them feel good about supporting you as well. Again, which comes down to how you present yourself and how you represent your community as well. Next slide. So also some realities about the Pro Tour, just so you know what you're getting into. It's very competitive and it's very deep. And there's layers, there's different strata as you kind of go through this, and you're going to keep on hitting glass ceilings as you go through this. It's a lot more competitive than you think. These are people, even though this is not a big money sport, it's unbelievably competitive, and people put their life into it. And you've got some great athletes that are just super smart and unbelievably talented at what they do. And you might even find that even way down in the ranking list as well. There's some people that have some serious skills. So it's very competitive. Be aware of that. You do need to be able to have to enter that a very competitive environment. And as we said, just that you need to be, minimize your weaknesses, maximize your competitive strengths, and be unbelievably mentally strong. That's what's going to make a big difference in whether you're successful or not. Getting started is very tough. Getting entry into PSA events is very difficult, and you'll find if you look at a $5,000 or $10,000 event in a kind of reasonable place, in a not far-flung place where not many people will go, but in a kind of North America or Europe, like a $10,000 tournament, it's just going to be unbelievably strong. So you're not going to have the luxury of designing your schedule in the way that you want. It's going to take you time to be able to, sometimes you're just going to enter lots of tournaments you're not going to get in. So that probably brings us back to what can we do to help you. Maybe we put on PSA closed satellite events to help you get off that floor. Or if you do go to college, try to play PSA closed satellites, try to get into 5Ks if you can, get off that floor. It takes a while to do that. Some people, as we mentioned, some people adapt to the pressures and lifestyle easily. Some people don't. If it's too hard for you, even if you're a very good player, it's some people are just not willing to invest or have that kind of lifestyle where you're traveling, you don't feel completely settled, and some people really adapt to it. But that's a reality. And as we said before, if your plan is, okay, I finish college, I might just play for a couple of years, I'm pretty good, that's probably the wrong attitude to approach it. You need to commit to it to get anywhere. And if you don't commit to it, you're not going to get anywhere. And so I would say, even if that is your plan to play for a short amount of time, absolutely, completely and utterly commit to it. Commit to the process, commit to the situation, commit to being a pro, learn as much as you can, and try to get as much out of it as you can, even if it's not your plan to be top 10 in the world and this is your career. You got to be positive. It's too competitive, to kind of have a negative attitude, and you have to have that growth mindset, and you've got to be able to shake off the losses. You've got to be able to shake off the not getting what you want, and being a perfectionist. It's that you can negativity. It's just going to spit you out. It's a competitive environment. It's going to spit you out pretty quickly. So you've got to stay positive. And as we said, there's only one winner per tournament. You got to get used to losing as well. It's the part of the game. You don't have to like it. In fact, it's better if you don't like it, but you have to be able to handle it. But as we said before as well, it's a privilege to be a professional athlete, and it's a lot of fun. You'll gain respect. You'll increase your contact base, make a lot of friends. It could be an incredibly positive thing in your life. And if you're lucky enough, you can represent your country, and for a lot of people, that's like the highest goal that they can have, is to wear the maple leaf and to represent their country, and to compete for the country with their friends, and it is a huge honor to do that. And so there are, those are some harsh realities, but also some very positive realities as well of what this is. Next slide. So quick summary. Look at about 15, 16, you start thinking about this, looking at this possibility as you're thinking about college. Is pro the thing you're going to do? Are you going to wait after college? If you do wait until after college, you definitely want to be playing PSA as you're going through that process. It's from my point of view, if I'm trying to increase or field a team in 5 years' time, or consistently field the team over a period of time, I don't want players that are graduating from Harvard saying, well, look, I've got a great job lined up at a hedge fund. Like, why am I going to pass that up? It's to try to make people understand that there is a time that is actually, it's not going to affect your future career, and it may even enhance it as well. So for a certain amount of time, being a pro athlete, committing yourself to this, it might actually help you, and it's not going to hinder you. There will be some people that's just like, okay, well, it's too good an opportunity to pass up. I can't do this. I got to go and take the hedge fund job. That might be true for some people. For a lot of people, it's not going to be the case. You do need to work your way up. A lot of your 20s in your career, you're going to be trying different things, and kind of, and you might even change direction sometime as well. So spending a few years focusing on something that you're very good at increases your contact base, gets you international travel, communicates the fact that you can focus and you can and manage yourself. That's actually, you're building some serious skills, and employers know this. So it's not going to affect your future career. It may even be very, very positive if it's for a certain amount of time. Once you get beyond about 27, then you're a pro athlete. Then that is what you are. And I definitely went through that, where I had that period. Am I going to leave? I was quite highly ranked at that stage. You're still, top 5 in the world at that age. It's kind of tough to leave that at that point. But if you go beyond that time, this becomes your career. This is who you are, and it's going to be very difficult to change at that time. Even though someone like Graham Riding did manage this as well. It's roughly 25 a year for the first 2 years. You can use college as your apprenticeship to try to kind of offset this in some way, and then you try to get as much experience as possible, work and train and play in different environments, trying out different coaching group, different coaches, different coaching groups. Try out as much as you can. It's going to help you in the long run. Once you make top 100 in the PSA, life gets so much easier, because you have access to funding from national body, from your provincial body, and you're obviously going to be making a little bit more money from your PSA events at that point, and things just do become a lot easier at that point. So again, that should be a springboard. It shouldn't just be where you sit back and be, a journeyman pro. You certainly, but things do get easier at that point. So it's a nice goal if you're thinking about, okay, what do these, what do the last couple of years of college and what do the first couple of years of my pro career look like? Is really looking to get into that kind of top 100, access funding. Might be different in some countries, but in Canada, that's the way it works. And then life becomes easier. Then it's, you've got a couple of years where you're really enjoying it. You're not feeling under too much financial pressure, and you can really focus on getting better and winning matches and represent your country. And also it's great fun, and but you have to have a lot of management and logistical skills to be able to do it well. And it's not something you should be afraid of, but it's something that's a good education, and you'll build a lot of skills as you're going through this, as you're fundraising, as you're managing your schedule, as you're trying to navigate through this process as you travel around the world and manage being a professional athlete and dealing with adversity and injuries and not getting what you want and plateauing, and how you manage to work around that. The person that approaches this in the most structured way, or maybe not structured is the wrong word, you've got to be flexible, but the person that plans and manages themselves in the best way is going to be the most successful. That's usually the case, but it's a good thing. It's a good education to have. So next slide. So really what I'm looking at, I'll field any questions. I don't have a time limit here. I think let me check my phone. There may be someone jump on. I'm not sure who's on, but we can ask, or Jeff can ask in a second, who's from the high performance group is on that can answer questions. So Cam just texted me, so he's here. So Cam Seth, he's from Fergus, Ontario, currently studies, also is doing his master's degree at Waterloo, I believe, Cam, and also he's probably approached it in a budget fashion, but very smart guy, and has some good opinions about how to approach this and what the optimal scenario looks like. So he'll be able to answer a lot of questions as I will answer as well. Can you go back just a second, Jeff? So really the big question is, how can we help you? How can we help you achieve, rather than just give you a check for $25,000? I just think it's not going to happen. Even if we managed a very good fundraising campaign, that's just not going to happen. With all the other resources that we're trying to build, that's just not going to happen. So, but is there some way that we can help, and financially, with some logistical help, with information, with coaching support, with like building a community that you can come in and out of. The things that are up in the air is we don't have a fundraising campaign to help you right now, but maybe that's something we can get going. We don't have a national training center, but we're in talks there. And also, where it makes sense for you to, is there something as you're coming into Toronto? Can we help out with accommodation? Can we help with families billeting you to make that easier? Or can we help you out with some European contacts to help you help you get into some groups that are going to be helpful for you and eventually get into leagues? Can we run PSA closed satellite events that will get you off that floor, get you off and get some points to make it easier as you navigate? So these are open questions, but yeah, I think just thank you for your time, and hopefully there are people on here that are seriously considering it, and I'll answer any questions that you have. And let me just check again. Yeah, I think it's just Cam Seth that's on right now. So between myself and Cam, we'll answer any questions that you have.
Great, thank you, Martin, and welcome to Cam for joining us as well. Thank you. If anyone would like to ask questions, please by all means unmute your microphone and ask, or you can type it into the chat section, and we've got a good 15 minutes to ask Martin and Cam questions as you see fit. So we look forward to questions. Maybe while we're waiting for first question, as we've got one in here, from Aman Shaheen. Aman is one of our top juniors in the country, and she asks, during this period of time, how would you keep yourself motivated to train? And I guess that's open to both you, Martin, and Cam.
You know what? I think I'd rather defer that to Cam because he's actually the one that's training. He's going through that process right now. So, Cam, how do you motivate yourself to train during this time?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, that's a great question. I think for everybody it would be a little bit different. But for me, I think, I mean, interestingly enough, I actually am really enjoying this time for training, just because I can really, focus 100% on the training and not have too much distraction with too many tournaments or matches. So I can just kind of week in, week out, see the improvements. So for me, that's really where I get my motivation from is just kind of laying out a really like a plan for what I'm trying to do, and then really just seeing the improvements week in, week out. And I speak with Martin regularly. I speak with my coach regularly to try to think about what I'm trying to develop, and then just enjoying that process.
So, in absence of other questions right now, I mean, Jeff, if there are any questions, please fire away. But so, is there any information that you think I didn't get to that you're going to be useful from your experience? Is there anything that you'd either like to either correct or emphasize or offer new information that isn't here?
Maybe so. Like I'm maybe in a slightly different scenario than kind of the optimal setup that Martin spoke about, mainly because I never had a chance to go overseas or go to Europe or really travel internationally for tournaments, mainly just because financially it was difficult for me when I started. But I guess my point would be like it is still possible to have a really enjoyable career and really try to see yourself improve, even without having those abilities to go international. And then one other thing, which Martin had sent me to kind of think about this before the conversation, and another thing that I really wanted to emphasize was for those of you who are going professional, to remember that when you start training like a professional, it's like really hard on the body. And I got injured in like the first 6 months of training like a professional. And it's just something to keep in mind that when you start going pro, make sure you've got a trainer and a proper coach working with you, so that you really, can make the most out of it. Because you see it all the time where they just start training and the training load pretty much goes twice as much as you were doing before, and then you get injured. And hopefully, I hope for any of you that doesn't happen.
So we've had a question come in here from Robbie Hurd. It says, if we're in a position to get firm interest in sponsoring a player or team, are there avenues to explore? So with respect to 5K, 10K, etc.
I don't know if I understand the question. Can you repeat the question again?
So it says, if we're in a position to get firm interest in sponsoring a player or team, are there avenues to explore with respect to 5K? Oh, get a firm. Okay, thank you, Robbie. So I guess with respect to getting a firm or company interested in sponsoring a player or a team, are there avenues to explore with respect to donating, I guess, 5K or 10K, etc.?
I mean, again, I think Cam was. He can talk about this. From my point of view, I mean, there's only a handful of players in the world that actually give any kind of value to to firms or companies or corporations, or that are actually going to give some proper value through their branding. So it's mostly just that people want to help out. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. They're not going to get much out of it other than feeling that they're helping you out. I mean, that's the reality. So I think if you approach it like that, rather than, okay, I'm number one in Canada junior level and you want to sponsor me, is like, realistically, they're not going to get a lot out of it in terms of their branding. It's going to be something that is going to come from a certain place in their company that is where they're happy to spend the money, or it could just be personal donations as well. So I think you should always ask. I think doing it through your club is the best way, and I think there's usually going to be people in that club that run businesses and they own their own business, or they're willing to donate, or they're willing to sponsor you in some way. They're not going to give you $25,000. I think that's highly, highly unlikely. I mean, probably can't happen in some places, but I think you're more likely to get, $500 here and $1,000 there, maybe a couple of thousand here. You might find that a benefactor wants to give you a little bit more, but it's going to be the smaller donations, and then what you're offering them back is, maybe you go on and you give them a couple of lessons, maybe you give them updates, maybe you give your club updates or your area some updates on your journey, and they can feel a part of this journey in some way. So I think being aware of actually what value you're offering to these people is the most important thing. And it's at the moment, it's not going to be in branding and offering some commercial benefit back to them.
Okay, we have another question here from Sultan Akif. This is probably a great question for Cam specifically, but Martin, feel free to chime in too. He asks, what are the most common injuries in professional players that juniors should consider and try to prevent?
Sure. So I can try to answer that one. That's a great question. I think that the injuries you tend to see a lot of are ankle problems, knee problems, hip problems. But I think a lot of this stems from, at least as far as what I've learned in having my own knee and hip problems, is that it all stems from having like a weak core, pretty much. Because mainly what happens is the core and your hips as well, they kind of stabilize the whole body. And if you're, like when we're on the squash court, there's so much twisting and turning and lunging. And if you're not really solid through the midsection, then other parts of your body try to stabilize. So for example, your ankles. And that's when you see people rolling ankles or having knee problems. It's just because they're not stable through the midsection. So for me, example, I had a lot of hip problems, but then as soon as I started spending, lots of time working on my core stability, then the hip problems almost disappeared. So that would be kind of what I see and what I recommend. But I'm sure Martin has maybe another opinion on that stuff.
Well, I think you just highlighted the areas: this ankle, knee, hip, lower back. Maybe you'll have some issues with your wrist and your shoulder, but it does tend to be more because of the movements that you're making. It does tend to be in your legs or lower back or hips that the biggest issues come. I think Cam made a great point, and just about making sure that you are, especially if you're trying to pick up as much experience as possible and saying yes to everything and trying to really increase your experience and your understanding of what it takes and observe a lot and kind of absorb a lot by osmosis. You want to make sure that you do have a good core and you have a trainer that looks after you. And it's difficult to do everything by yourself. And that's an area that I think that you can really build a solid core in, and a trainer will, even if they don't have much experience about squash, they'll be able to look at the game and look at the demands and help you through a program that's going to radically reduce your injury, your ability to get injured. I used to suffer a lot from ankle injuries, and it's an area that's probably ankle and foot, actually. And I used to find walking in sand was very helpful. I used to build all the little muscles in my feet and ankle. But if you're living in the city, it's very hard to do this. So you've got to find exercises that build up these small muscles. And again, I think that's something that when it comes down to the, trainers are very smart these days. Like when I was learning, it was all big muscle groups, right? And it took me a while just to figure it out by myself. What was actually if you build up a big muscle group, then you're going to use it, but then all your stabilizers and things like this are actually going to they're not strong enough. So being able to build up all these stabilizers and the small muscles and the things like around your knee, around your hip, around your lower back, around your ankle, around your feet, that's going to help you a lot. So I think it's coming back to what Cam says, get a trainer. It's going to be very difficult for you to manage yourself. You're managing so many other different things. It's going to be difficult to manage everything about this process.
Okay, great. So another question here from Gabriel asks, what do you consider a prototype weekly training schedule?
Cam, do you want to have a run at this, and I'll come after?
Sure. I can start it off. It's actually a good question. So throughout, I've been playing the Pro Tour for 4 years, and my weekly training schedule what I think is the perfect training schedule has changed a lot. Also, it changes a lot whether you're in season or in the off season. But kind of like for me, what it always seems to come back to is I'm generally in the gym 2 to 3 times a week. And so that's working on the strength and stability stuff, usually with a trainer or with the program my trainer's given me. And then I'm on court usually 5 times a week. So usually like Monday through Friday, I'm generally trying to put those days on court. And then usually 2 to 3 like conditioning type sessions. So for me, that was usually biking or running or ghosting sessions. And then that's kind of like the base training. Oh, I should also mention some match play, which would be included in the this on court sessions. And then outside of that, I do a lot of stretching. So probably like close to an hour of stretching every day, and that's just to keep my body healthy because I'm training so much. And then finally, I guess, and this actually answers another question, which I see is it important to take a day off, which is Sunday is like almost always a day off for me. And even Saturday is sometimes off, or maybe I'll just do, one session in the morning on Saturday and then take a good amount of the weekend off to just kind of let the body recover and prepare for the next week. So maybe Martin has some things to add as well, but that's my base training schedule.
Nice. I mean, there's not much I can say to that changes from there. I mean, the idea, there's been a few ideas in this over the years, like 5.5 days, where you've got one full day off. I think everyone needs one full day off, which is just it's a mental break as well as a physical break. There's another half day probably in the middle that helps you where you're kind of active rest, which could be just basically getting the lactic acid out your muscles and or doing something a little bit more fun, rather than just be totally focused on training all the time. So I think, and then some other training ideas, say like 3 days on, a day off, then 2 days, then a day off, and then 3 days and a day off. There's the important thing is that you've got to figure out what systems you're trying to train. Are you in a maintenance phase, or are you trying to actually train and get better? You can certainly get better at technique, and you can always try to do that. But if you're actually trying to get to physically train yourself, whether it's strength, whether it's speed, endurance, you got to factor in what you got to factor in. You can't train every day if you're actually going to do the high intensity training. You need a lot of rest, and you're really looking for those kind of 2 or 3 sessions a week that are really going to make that difference in your body. So you got to figure out how you're going to knit this in, what phase you're in. If you're in the summer training, then let's say you're probably at the start, you're trying to increase your strength and your endurance. So a lot of that time you'll be doing like a little bit longer stuff. You'll be doing like quite heavy weights. You won't be doing so much on court at that point. That as it phases through, you're probably working on a little bit more speed and the ability to change direction, your agility. As you get into match play, then it's just knitting it all into match play. So each training phase has a system that you're trying to test. If you're really trying to get a training benefit, if you're looking for, it doesn't take a lot to do that. I don't know whether there's anyone on here that was on a webinar I did about squash training, just trying to give you some simple hacks. And really one of the biggest things from that was, look, it doesn't take you don't need to train 7 days a week to actually just takes, it takes low impact exercise, takes moderate impact exercise in terms of maintenance and preparation. But really what you're looking for is 2 to 3 of really, really hard 20, 30-minute sessions. And that's what's going to give you a training effect. So I would say, 5.5 days, there's going to be a lot of maintenance in there. But if you're really trying to make a difference, you're looking for those 2 to 3 sessions that are like high intensity focused, and you're going to need a lot of rest after those, because you're going to overload your body at that point. You just can't overload your body every day.
Okay, so we've got, we'll take 2 more questions here, and I think we can kind of combine them into one question. So the first question is from Aman, and she asks, what should your training look like during quarantine? And if I may throw in a comment here, I don't play squash myself, but from a curling standpoint, I think it's about being creative a little bit with respect to training, because in quarantine, there's only so much you can do based off what equipment and resources you have access to. And one of the unique ones that I've seen recently from one of our top athletes in curling, and he is an Olympic champion. He lives in an apartment in Toronto, and his way of building endurance is by simply walking the stairs in his apartment building just to maintain some cardio while he has no access to a gym. Every athlete's a little bit different with respect to how they treat quarantine. Cam, maybe you can speak to what you're doing in quarantine, which coincides with the last question about how many hours of training would you recommend Monday to Friday, morning, afternoon, and what are you doing during quarantine?
Sure. Yeah, I can try to answer that question. That's actually a really tough question. Like, I'm just trying to brainstorm some ideas here, because I mean, one of the reasons is this type of thing has never happened ever, really. So, especially as a pro athlete, nobody really knows what it should look like when we don't know when we're going to get on court again. But I mean, for myself, these are kind of some of the things that I'm doing. So for me, I really took a lot of time to think about what do I want to improve in this time, because this could go on for 6 months. It could go on for who knows how long. And I was really thinking about, like, okay, how do I want to come out of this better? And one of the big things for me was my speed and power and just general endurance. But the main thing really was speed and power. So I really was trying to think about how can I improve those things. And so I've kind of built my schedule around that. So, on Monday, I will do a workout, say outside if it's nice out, or, in my house if it's not very nice out. And just really trying to, you can speak with your trainer, or you can find this online, the specific timing of, speed and power exercises. So I'll be doing, lunges real as quick as I possibly can for a short period of time, and then taking a rest. So I'll do that Monday. I'll do that probably on Thursdays as well, because you can't do that every single day. It's quite tough on the body. But then I see that improving week in, week out. And so for me, that's really enjoyable. But you might, for yourself, you'd want to think, okay, what do you want to work on in this time? Talk to your coach, talk to your trainer. Because you're going to have to be creative and think of ways of working on things that you might, you can't go on court. So you're going to have to find some other way. And in terms of the other question, how many hours, I don't know if the question was how many hours in quarantine or how many hours in general. Like, my hours of training have definitely gone down in quarantine just because I can't get on court. But generally, like, I'd probably be doing, 15 hours a week, I would say 15 to 20, if you include everything. But I wouldn't recommend that to somebody just starting, because I think staying injury-free is the most important thing. But yeah, one last thing I will just mention, that if anybody ever wants to, there's lots of other great people to ask on the team, and Martin, but if you ever want to ask me, feel free to add me on Facebook or anything like that. I'm always happy to answer these kind of questions, and also give me more time to think about my answers. But for now, I'll pass over to Martin for whatever he has to add.
I mean, that was great, and it's a nice offer, and I think you guys should take Cam up in that. I mean, I think it's, I think you're looking for a simple thing, and and I think the simple answer is there's not a simple answer. But if you're training 5.5 days a week, if you're doing 2 sessions a day, 5 days a week, 1 half day kind of active rest, 1 full day where you're off, and in that time, you're not going to be able to do an intense session every day. They're going to be low to moderate sessions with some high impact sessions in there, with probably like 3 high impact sessions. A lot of that time when you're doing a 2-hour session, you're not working hard for 2 hours. You're warming up, you're warming down, you're preparing your body, your mind, your neurology to be able to put in this high intensity effort. So I would say that 5.5 days a week, 5 days a week is going to be 2 sessions. what 3 of those sessions in the week are going to be high impact sessions. Now, whether that's weights, whether that's running, whether that's speed work, I think that's really what you're trying to do. You know, in quarantine, I think it's almost like this is summer training. I mean, this is summer training. You're trying to increase your strength and your endurance, you know, and as this lifts, then you can take that strength and that endurance into, you know, and then adapt it into squash fitness when you go. So I would say that's probably the best thing to do. And that's really what professional athletes try to do at the start of their summer training. They're trying to increase their endurance and their strength. And that gives them a base to then adapt to the demands of the sport as they go through their summer training. So I think that gives you a rough idea of what you need to be doing. 5.5 days, 2 days, 2 sessions a day, with you know, 3 of those sessions to be very high intensity.
Great. Thank you, Martin, and thank you, Cam, for your great feedback and information, and thank you to everybody for your questions. Just to comment on one thing that Maxime Leclerc has put in here, as well as coincides to what Cam said. It's a great idea, you know, to you know, join in on you know, Zoom trainings or video trainings. There's a lot of those out there. Go on Facebook. Follow our national squad on Facebook, Twitter, not just Cam, but I mean, some of the girls, Holly Naughton, Danielle Letourneau, etc. These girls are some of the fittest athletes in the world. Holly almost daily is posting amazing fitness videos of some of her workout clips, on top of many other things that you can use to help benefit your training, especially in quarantine. So take advantage of those resources in this crazy time. With that said, I'd like to thank everybody for attending today's Heath's Hints webinar on junior squash to pro international squash. Just a friendly reminder, Martin will be back next Thursday with another edition of Heath's Hints on mental training. I encourage you to sign up for that. And then the following week, for any coaches or anyone interested, we'll be back with another Coach PD webinar on Wednesday, June 10th. On building a positive parent culture, if you're interested. So go online to Club Locker and register for either of those. And with that said, we hope you stay safe and have a wonderful day. Thank you, everybody.
Jeff, before you sign off, I just saw some comments